My name is Joanna Trevitt, and I am 32 years old. I've been a licensed electrician for 9 years, not because I had no other options. I have a diploma in electrical engineering technology from NATE, and I could have gone into project consulting, sitting in an office reviewing blueprints all day. I chose the field because I'm good at it. Because there is something genuinely satisfying about walking into a building that didn't have power yesterday and leaving it lit. My knuckles are always a little scraped. My work pants have burn marks on the left knee from a job last spring. I keep a tube of hand cream in my truck because the cold up here does something vicious to your skin when you're working outdoors in January. I have never once been embarrassed by any of it, until my sister made me feel like I should be. It was the third week of October when she called. I was driving home from a commercial retrofit in Sherwood Park, still in my high-vis jacket, radio off because I'd been listening to the foreman talk for 10 hours, and I needed the quiet. I picked up expecting nothing unusual. My sister Carolyn is 4 years younger than me, and she calls at odd times to talk about things that feel urgent to her but turn out to be nothing. I love her in the complicated way you love someone who has always seen the world slightly differently than you do. There was a pause before she spoke, the rehearsed kind. "Joanna," she said, "I want to talk to you about Christmas." I told her I was already planning to come. I'd booked the time off in August. Another pause. "We're doing things a little differently this year. Brendan's parents are coming in from Victoria. His whole family, actually. His mom, his dad, his younger brother who just finished his MBA, his aunt who apparently used to work for the federal government in some capacity Carolyn has mentioned 3 times without ever clarifying." I said that sounded like a lot of people. "It is," she said, "and Brendan wants it to go really well. You know how much this means to him. His family is very," she searched for the word, "accomplished. And they're not really familiar with trades work. And Brendan thought," she cleared her throat, "he thought it might be better if you didn't come this year." I was on the Henday. Traffic was slow. I remember watching the brake lights ahead of me pulse red in the dark and thinking that I had misheard her. He doesn't want me at Christmas. He just thinks it might create some awkwardness with the conversation about what everyone does. He didn't want his family asking questions about your work and having it seem like our family is. She didn't finish that sentence. I don't think she could. I said, "Like your family is what, Carolyn?" She didn't answer. I said, "Like your family is less than his." She said, "Joanna, please, I'm not saying I agree with him. I'm just telling you what he asked." And that was the part that got me. Not Brendan. I had never had a strong opinion about Brendan. He was pleasant and vague the way some people are, always just beyond the threshold of a real conversation. But my sister who I had driven 4 hours to help move into her first apartment. My sister whose tuition I had helped cover 1 semester when our parents couldn't. She had called me to deliver this message, and she had not told him no. I said, "I understand. I meant something very different by it than she thought I did." I sat in my driveway for a long time after I got home. My neighbor's dog was barking at something in the alley. The sky had that particular flat gray quality it gets in Edmonton in October, the color of a concrete form before the pour. I just sat there and let the heat run down. That night, I didn't call my best friend Petra, who works dispatch at the same electrical company I do, and who would have immediately started planning some kind of confrontation. I didn't text my coworker Sean, who would have said something darkly funny that would have made me laugh and then feel worse. I just sat with it. The specific particular weight of being told your existence is a liability. That the work you do every day, work that keeps the lights on literally, in buildings all over this city, is something your family needs to disappear for a dinner party. What nobody in my family knew yet was that 6 weeks earlier I had passed my Red Seal exam. For anyone outside the trades, a Red Seal is the interprovincial certification that says you are among the best in your field in the country. I had been studying for it for 2 years. Practice exams at the kitchen table at 11 at night. Weekends reading the Canadian Electrical Code. A 3-day prep course in Calgary I'd paid for out of pocket. When the result came through, I had sat in my truck outside the testing center and cried quietly for about 4 minutes. Then I drove to Tim Hortons and got a large coffee and didn't tell anyone because I wanted to tell everyone at once, in person, at Christmas. They had taken that moment from me, so I decided to let them have their dinner. I was curious what the holiday would teach them without me in it. Christmas came. I spent it in Edmonton, which sounds lonelier than it actually was. Petra had invited me to her family's place in St. Albert and I almost went, but in the end I needed to be still. I made myself a proper dinner. Roast chicken with herbs, scalloped potatoes, a butter tart from the bakery 2 blocks over, because I wasn't going to let Brendan ruin my holiday entirely. I ate at my own kitchen table in my own apartment that I own. I bought it 3 years ago, a 2-bedroom in Glenora, because electricians in Alberta make good money and I don't spend stupidly. It was quiet in a way that felt almost chosen. I lit a candle. I read 50 pages of a novel. I went to bed early and slept well. I had no idea what was happening at my sister's house while I was doing all of that. Brendan's family had arrived from Victoria 2 days before Christmas. His mother, Gail, was warm and curious in the way that people who ask a lot of questions are warm and curious. His father, Bob, was a retired civil engineer. His younger brother, whose MBA had been referenced so many times I had developed an opinion of it before meeting him, was named Tyler and was 26 and had just started a position at a financial firm in Vancouver. His aunt, the one with the federal government connection, was named Patricia. And I already had her name in the used names file, so let me say instead she had a background in infrastructure policy, which will become relevant. On Christmas Eve over dinner, the conversation turned to family and work the way it always does with new people. Carolyn mentioned that she worked in marketing. Brendan talked about his accounting practice. His brother talked for a while about his new role. And then Gail, being the kind of woman who notices the gaps in a table, asked Brendan if Carolyn had any siblings. He said she had one sister. Gail asked what the sister did. Brendan said she worked in the trades, electrician. He said it the way you might mention a parking ticket. A minor administrative inconvenience, resolved, not worth discussing further. Gail's husband Bob stopped cutting his turkey. Bob asked what kind of electrical work. Brendan said he wasn't really sure of the specifics. Bob asked if I worked residential or commercial or industrial. Brendan said he thought it was commercial maybe. Bob asked why I wasn't at dinner. And my sister, who had been very quiet through all of this, told the truth. She said that Brendan had thought it might be awkward given the difference in backgrounds, and that they decided not to invite me this year. The table went still. Gail put her wineglass down slowly. Bob looked at Brendan for a moment with the particular expression of a man who has just been asked to account for something he didn't expect to be accountable for. Then he said, quietly, that he didn't quite understand the logic. He said that he himself had spent 12 years on construction sites before he ever sat behind a desk. That his own father had been a millwright in Sudbury for 30 years. That in his experience, the people who actually built things were the ones who knew the most about how the world worked. Gail said she would have very much liked to meet me. Brendan laughed and said he just thought the conversation might be limited, given how different their day-to-day lives were. Bob asked if I was Red Seal certified. Brendan said he didn't know what that meant. Bob said that was unfortunate and returned to his turkey. It didn't end the dinner, but the temperature of that room did not recover. Carolyn told me later that Brendan had tried to explain himself twice more over the course of the evening, and each time the conversation had drifted somewhere else before he could finish. Bob had asked Gail to take a walk with him before dessert. Tyler, the MBA, had gone quiet in a way that suggested he was recalibrating. 5 days after Christmas, on a Thursday afternoon, there was a knock at my door. I opened it to find my parents, my sister, and Brendan standing on my front step in the cold. My mother looked like she hadn't slept. My father looked like he was there because my mother had made him come. Brendan looked like a man who had spent 5 days arguing with himself, and finally, reluctantly, accepted that he had lost. I let them in. I put the kettle on, because I was not going to be the person who left people standing in a cold hallway without offering something hot. Even when those people had recently decided my presence was an embarrassment to my own family. We all sat in the living room, and my mother started talking, and I let her. She told me about the dinner, about Bob, about Gail saying she would have loved to meet me, about the question about Red Seal certification. She said Brendan had something he wanted to tell me. She looked at him. He stared at his mug. He said, "I heard about the certification." I waited. He said, "Carolyn told me after. You passed your Red Seal." I said, "Yes." He said, "I didn't know that was a big deal." I said, "It's a national standard. It means I can work anywhere in the country. It took me 2 years of study on top of 9 years of field experience." His father knew what it meant immediately. The silence that followed was one of the most clarifying moments I have experienced as an adult. Not satisfying in a triumphant way. Clarifying. Like a room coming into focus. My father cleared his throat. He said he was proud of me. He'd always been proud of me, but he said it again, looking at me directly, and I thanked him and said it would have meant a great deal to hear that. At Christmas, at a table I'd been told not to come to. My mother started crying. I handed her a tissue and let her cry because there was nothing to short-circuit that moment. It needed to be felt. Brendan apologized. It was a real apology and a limited one at the same time. It had too much explanation in it, too much reasoning about what he'd been thinking, too much of the architecture of the mistake instead of just the acknowledgement of it. But there was something genuine underneath all of that scaffolding, and I accepted it. Not for him. For me. Because I've learned that carrying resentment is its own kind of labor, and I already work hard enough. What nobody said out loud, but every person in that room understood, was this. The thing Brendan had been ashamed of was the exact thing that had earned his own father's respect before I'd even walked into the room. The red seal. The high-vis jacket. The 9 years of showing up in the dark and the cold to make buildings work. He had tried to hide me, and instead had walked himself into a moment he would spend a long time thinking about. My sister and I talked the next day, just the two of us, over the phone. That conversation was harder and more honest than anything that happened in my living room with everyone present. She said she should have pushed back when Brendan first brought it up. I said yes, she should have. She said she didn't know how to explain to him why it was wrong without it turning into a fight about his family's values versus hers. I said that was exactly the fight she should have been willing to have. She was quiet for a long time after that. Then she said she was sorry. Not a complicated apology, just sorry. That one landed differently. About 3 weeks into January, I got an email. It was from Bob, Brendan's father. He had gotten my contact information through Carolyn. He said he hoped I didn't mind him reaching out directly. He said that over the holidays he'd mentioned my certification to a colleague of his, a project manager at a mid-size electrical contracting firm in Calgary that was expanding its Edmonton operations. They were looking for a Red Seal journey person who could move into a supervisory role on a new commercial build starting in the spring. He thought I might be the right fit. He said he would be glad to make an introduction if I was interested. I sat with that email for about 10 minutes. Then I wrote back and said I was very interested. The interview happened in February, in a boardroom on the 14th floor of a building downtown that I had actually worked on 3 years earlier. I'd pulled wire through the east wing during the fit-out phase. I did not mention this at first. I mentioned it when the project manager asked if I had any experience with that building's electrical infrastructure, and I was able to describe it in specific detail from memory, down to the panel locations, and the gauge of the wire in the mechanical room. He laughed and said that was either very impressive or a little unsettling. I told him both were accurate. I got the offer in March. Senior journey person, supervisory track, with a path to foreman within 18 months. The pay was a significant step up from where I'd been. I called my father first. Then I called my sister. She cried. The good kind of crying. The kind where you can hear someone actually feeling something real. I didn't call Brendan, that wasn't necessary, but I imagine Carolyn told him. I imagine he had a moment, maybe alone in his car or in the quiet of a room, where he understood the full shape of what his decision had cost, and what it had also, despite itself, set in motion. He had tried to keep me away from his table. He had walked me into a room I didn't even know I was supposed to be in. I started the new role in April. The site is in the southeast part of the city, a mixed-use development, 4 floors of commercial below 8 floors of residential. On the first morning, I stood in the unfinished ground floor in my hard hat and my red seal on my jacket and watched my crew get to work and felt something that I have no better word for than right. The particular specific feeling of something that has been waiting a long time to click into place finally clicking. I still own my apartment in Glenora. I still have the burn mark on my work pants from last spring. I still keep hand cream in the truck because January in Alberta is not a joke, and I still have my red seal. Nobody can take that from me. Nobody ever tried to.